Honeywell, it looks like this. The multinational conglomerate makes aircraft parts and employs about 27,000 engineers, but half of them don't work with metal and tools. They actually work with software. David Cote has been CEO of Honeywell for 15 years and has seen how technology is reshaping the manufacturing industry. He joins me now. David, we couldn't have a more appropriate person, I think, talk to us about one of the major themes. First of all, I want to get your reaction, though. I think every night now we're accustomed to seeing a lot of tweets from the president, a lot of controversy, as we heard, in some cases, some confusion about the U.S. and its relationship with all of our international allies. Honeywell has a global footprint. How do you feel about that, about your ability to do business internationally? Is President Trump going to be good for business?
Well, I'd say it depends what he does. Right now it's just words, and we'll see what actually happens. And that'll, if it ends up in a trade war, okay, that's a problem. If we end up with better trade deals, a better economy, then we'll all say, wow, that was brilliant. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
So it sounds like you're giving him the benefit of the doubt right now. You think some of this is posturing.
Well, I've always kind of felt like with any politician that it's really important to see what they actually do. What they actually talk about is one thing, but what they actually do is what matters. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that, because these aren't policies yet. A couple of executive orders, these things haven't been legislated, and there is a lot on the agenda. One thing he's made really clear, and I think a lot of people are heartened to hear him talking about jobs, about getting good-paying jobs back in the U.S. Give us an idea of what we touched on about what manufacturing looks like. Some people, I think, have this idea that we're going to go back to the sort of heyday of manufacturing that sort of defined the U.S., maybe even 50, 40, 20 years ago. Things have changed dramatically. What have you seen in your tenure at Honeywell?
Yeah. Well, first of all, manufacturing is always going to be important because, and I say that not just because I'm a manufacturer, but because no matter what you deal with in your life, you're dealing with physical objects of some kind. And it's like I try to say is if you want heat in your house, software is not going to do that. You got to burn something.
Right.
If you want to go from here to Boston, which
we'll get to the hat in a minute.
You got to get on a plane. You got to burn something.
Right.
So manufacturing of things is always going to be important. It's been a tremendous source of productivity for the country and for the world. And productivity is important because that's where standard of living comes from. The more productive you are as a nation, the higher your standard of living. Well, the next wave of productivity is going to be coming from the interaction between the digital space and the physical space. How do you use your capability in software along with the domain knowledge you have of physical things and have those interact in a way that creates a better physical output than what you had before? And that's where we're especially focused, because if you take a look at, we make jet engines, cockpits, wheels and brakes for planes, control systems for petrochemical plants, process technologies that get used in chemical plants, turbochargers. You'd say, probably chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. That's what those guys do. But as you pointed out, half our engineers are developing software.
Yeah.
And it's because that interaction between the digital and physical space is going to be hugely important in this century. It's the next phase of the digital revolution.
So can we talk, so right now he's sort of, calling people down to Washington. President Trump is saying, I want you to build a plant here, which is fine, but can we talk about reviving the middle class without talking about training, without talking about education, without talking about the role of technology and automation? We need that part of the conversation, too, it seems.
This whole idea of how do you develop an even more robust middle class than we have is not just going to get solved by improving the number of manufacturing jobs. Because, to your point, software is going to become much more important. And if we take a look at, say, just basic math and science education in the country, we have 300 million people in the country. How many of them are truly engaged and have good broadband experience and can actually relate to the machine all the time? How often do we look at education and just kind of have 30 kids in a class, all kind of moving along at a middle pace? So the ones in the middle may be fine, the ones ahead are bored, the ones who are behind are struggling. Why can't we use the machine to do more of that? There's a lot of development that we need to do as a country if we're going to have the kind of robust middle class that we'd like to have. Infrastructure is another one, and it's nice to see the discussion going on. So, yeah, this is a piece of it, but there's a lot of other things we ought to be doing as a country, because this century driven by the economic rise of China, the digital age, and the population growing from 7 to 10 billion people, is going to be just as traumatic as the last one, which, by the way, we didn't handle so well.
Yeah, if we haven't noticed. Well, of course, David, you are stepping down as CEO of Honeywell. You're going to stay on as chairman. But thankfully, you're going to stay engaged and help us solve some of these problems.
Well, God, I hope so. Yeah,
it's been a tremendous transformation at Honeywell.